Hey, this is Roger Whitney. Now, before we get started with the show, I want to have a special announcement. Late last week, Equifax, one of the three major credit card reporting bureaus, disclosed that they had a major database breach affecting more than 143 Americans. That's about 60% of all adults. The hackers were able to acquire names, social security numbers, birth dates, and home addresses, along with some other information. This is a really big deal, and we don't know who exactly was impacted and who wasn't. So over the weekend, what I did is I created an Equifax data breach action plan of 6 steps you can take to help mitigate some of the risk of credit fraud and remain vigilant, because this data is going to be out there for a long period of time. If you are already a member of the 6-Shot Saturday community, I've already sent you this action plan. If you are not, go to rogerwhitney.com, click on the Learning Center, and you can download your free action plan today. All right, now let's get on with the show. Hey, you know what they say? Yeah, to get too great, you got to blow up what's good. Well, I may be doing that with the show, hopefully.
Are you ready to make the most of the only life you have? To make smart money choices focused on achieving what you care about most? Here to help you balance living well today without sacrificing your tomorrow is the Retirement Answer Man, Roger Whitney.
It's been like 188 weeks. Every week that we've had the Retirement Answer Man show. That's like 3.5 years of you and I walking this journey and noodling on how to create not just a great retirement, but a great life. But I'm going to be honest with you. I get a little bit lonely in the show. So what I thought I'd do today is bring on Nicole Mills, my awesome sidekick and the true brains of the operation, to play listener, because we're going to answer listener questions today. So Nicole Mills, how are you doing today?
I am so excited to be here, Roger.
Excited to be on the show. Now, we are a fee-only financial planning and investment management firm in Fort Worth, Texas, but we work with clients where?
All over the United States. We've even had some clients in Asia and Europe, which is pretty cool.
Pretty crazy. U.S. expats living overseas. So we work with clients across the country, helping them on that journey towards freedom. Mainly clients over 50 years old, right?
Right.
So what we're going to do today is answer listener questions, and you're going to play the role of the listener asking the question. You ready for that?
I'm totally ready.
All right. But first, what do we need to have happen?
The all-important disclaimer.
We're going to have to work on that serious voice. It's time for that all-important disclaimer. So real serious here. Don't take advice from me on the show. It's a silly thing to do. I don't know anything about you. I only give advice to clients that I work with as a fiduciary. And as far as I know, you are not one of those yet. So before you make any decisions, talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor, and think of this as helpful hints in education, because that's just common sense. Now, in the Hot Topic segment, we're going to talk about spending as we get older and how that might impact how you plan. So in the news today, JP Morgan came out with some numbers talking about the changes in spending by age and household size, which is something we haven't talked about before. Now, Nicole, I know we've talked about and worked with clients where they're planning on those go-go years, those slow-go years, and those no-go years, right? Which are different seasons in retirement. But there are other seasons in life too. Like, what season are you in from a household level on your spending?
Well, I've got a son who's 5 who just started kindergarten and one who is 3.5. So we are, lowering the preschool spending, but I hear that sports and a lot of the kids' activities can get pretty pricey.
Yeah, I think you're just entering the season of really ramping up the spending with all the kid stuff, right? Camps and books and activities and building your household, you and your husband. Whereas me, I'm 50 and God willing, and the plan, I'm still holding on to it, that in the next year or so, both my kids will be financially independent. They're 20 and 21 right now. So I'll be entering a season where I'm going to have a lot of discretionary spending. So it could really, ramp up the savings or slow down my spending in general. So there are definitely seasons in spending. And what the data showed from a JP Morgan study that I saw was that in retirement, so if we just look, let's say from the 50s to the 60s to the 70s and then beyond, for a 2-family household, spending does decrease over time. So you actually do see that go down to no-go years from a spending standpoint. That's why we talk about it making sense to plan that way, or at least consider that. But here's the interesting thing, that what happens, Nicole, what the studies show in terms of a single person household?
It doesn't really go down that much. It pretty much kind of stays humming along at the same rate.
Yeah, it's fairly flat. So that there's some pretty important implications that I don't think we've talked about on the show. We may need to explore this on an episode, that if you're a single family household, spending doesn't quite have the same kind of seasons or cycles as a two-person household. And that has some big implications. Some I can think of off the top that you need to consider if you are single and moving into retirement. One is the needs really need to be dialed in. I mean, they need to be dialed in for everybody. Those needs of how do I maintain my household and have a good life? You need to really know what those numbers are so you can plan and stress test against those numbers, because that's going to be more important, because you're going to have less flexibility in providing for those or adjusting those, because, you don't have the economies of scale that a two-person household has, right? Nicole, you and your husband are married. How many houses do you need to live in?
Just one.
Right. How many trips to the grocery shop, right? You go for the family.
We go for the family, right?
So there are a lot of economies of scale there that a single family household doesn't have. That's why those need levels are really important. And I've had some comments from listeners of, hey, all of us aren't married. And I think we did a show talking about single family households, but we really didn't dial into this. So, in fact, Nicole, would you please make a note of this for one of our upcoming retirement plan lives? Let's make sure we focus on someone that's single so we can really dive into the implications of a single family household. But I think the big takeaway here is that we do need to know what our needs are, whether you're single or in a two-person household. But especially if you're in a one-person household, it's really important that you know what those numbers are. Now, what are we doing next now?
So, Roger, we've actually got a lot of listener questions to address this week. So why don't we hop over to the practical planning segment? All right, guys, welcome to the practical planning segment of the show. Today, we are tackling some of your questions. And as a reminder, if you want to be featured on this segment of the show, you could even have your own voice featured. Go to rogerwhitney.com, click on Ask a Question, and you can submit what's on your mind. So today, our first question comes from Bill. There's a lot of math in this question, Roger. I hope you're ready for it.
I don't do live math. I don't do live math. That's like a rule.
Don't do live math? Okay. Well, he is a listener with a 401k contribution question. He's 59 and a half. He's got all his savings in his 401k. He's putting 9% in with an employer match of 3%. And he's got a son who is going to be heading to college after this year. He wants to know if he should drop his contribution to 6% instead of 9%. Thoughts on that?
What I also see in the question, he said to drop it to start building his emergency fund, which is a little worrisome. So, Bill, you've got caught in the tax trap of, you did it right. You've been saving very consistently in your 401k and deferring assets and getting the match, and deferring taxes and getting the match. So you've done really well, but you've gotten caught into that trap now that you're about to be 60, in that it sounds like you have all of your financial assets, liquid assets, in your tax deferred account, meaning you haven't paid taxes on it yet. And when you take distributions, you're going to have to. And that can be problematic. Generally, you don't just need tax deferral in your asset allocation in terms of the things that you buy, but I think it's really important to have tax diversification on your net worth statement, meaning that you have the pre-tax bucket, your 401k and assets like that, but you also you start building after-tax assets, your emergency fund, savings for college, and your tax-free bucket potentially with Roth 401ks or IRAs and things like that. For people in your situation, and I only know a little bit, I do think it's really important to, especially as you get older, to build up after-tax assets, especially if you have a son about to go to college and it doesn't sound like you have an emergency fund. So you may want to even reduce it even more and just contribute enough to get the match from the employer and start building that emergency fund and some after-tax assets so you can have some more flexibility in how you make financial decisions.
He doesn't ask this, Roger, but what are your thoughts as far as parents covering college expenses from their retirement accounts.
That's a hard one, right? It's a little bit of a value-based thing too. Like with my kids who are 20 and 21, so I'm paying the bills right now. We promised that we would pay for undergraduate education. And we've been blessed that we've been able to do that so far. But if you're tapping 401k assets to pay for college education, even if whether it's through a loan or through outright distributions, that can really handicap your own financial security. And the less financially secure you are, the less you're going to be able to help anybody else. Now, I don't know how you get creative about that, because there's always a line, as a parent, I get this, of we want to support our kids and their dreams, but there's also a line that you can cross to enabling them and not having them work the problem with you. I mean, a good example is when I was graduating high school, I went to community college, which was a lot less expensive, and I lived at home and I worked 2 jobs for a year or 2, which really helped from the financial perspective, and then transferred to the great Michigan State University, Sparty. My son, who's about to go into nursing school, he's going to contract with a hospital that will pay for his nursing school in return for him working there for a number of years, because they need the
That's
nursing.
awesome.
So I think I am much more of a fan of, it's not about college, it's about helping them get a career that they can be self-sufficient and morally sound. And they need to be part of the solution, because you don't want to sacrifice your entire financial security for something when they can help in the solution. So it's a big issue.
Bill, I hope that answered your question, plus a little extra there. And our next question.
That could be a whole episode, really.
It could. You're right. It really could. Our next question is from an anonymous listener about 401k management. So this one is unusual, Roger. So he is working with an advisory firm that manages his accounts, and he says that they have access to his retirement accounts. They have his username and his password for the accounts that they manage. So he says he trusts them. They don't have any disclosures on FINRA or anything like that, but he wants to know if it's a common practice. Thoughts on this?
That's a really hard thing. So I'm also the chief compliance officer of a advisory firm, so I'm sensitive to this type of stuff. It's common in the sense that clients want the advisor to help them on their retirement accounts and their entire balance sheet. And they, tend to want the advisor to be able to just do things on their behalf because they trust them, which totally makes sense just from a personal standpoint. Here's where the problem comes in. From a regulatory standpoint, it's a big no-no, because it triggers something called custody, meaning that when an advisor actually has control over assets, that is considered custody. And from a regulatory standpoint, it's typically not allowed. I know in our firm, it is not allowed. And that is a common practice if you're regulated by the SEC or FINRA, or some of these regulatory agencies. Now, we have clients that want to aggregate all their assets so we can see them, to be able to advise on them. And there are tools that allow us to do that, right? Where you can enter your username and password and it automatically brings in the account values. And we use some of those, and you could probably speak to this more than I can, but we can't set that up for them. We have to give the portal to the client to fill in their username and password.
You're right. And it can be an extra step, and it can be kind of cumbersome for the client sometimes. I hate having to say, no, you didn't enter it right, but
because they say, well, can I just give it to you to do? Which would be easy for everybody.
Yes, it would be so much easier, but it's just not, I guess.
But Mr. Anonymous, the point is, it's from a, just ease of work standpoint. It definitely makes everything easier for everybody. From a regulatory standpoint, I mean, there may be some exceptions, but it's a big no-no. I know as chief compliance officer of our firm, if I found an advisor doing that, there would be some serious issues. So hopefully that helps.
Okay, our next question is from, I guess it's not really a question necessarily, it's some feedback from Mark Miller.
Mark Miller, careerpivot.com.
Yes, a good friend of the show, also in the defensive driving video that I took.
Which is the weirdest thing.
He wrote in to share some feedback about the pre-retirement episode that you did a few weeks ago.
People love that show. I think we've got.
They did love that show. It's a great idea. It's a great concept. But I think Mark, rightly so, pointed out some considerations that you might want to think about before you pick a path for your pre-retirement. He talks about a client of his who had to work on hard concrete floors all day long, and it was really tough on his body. And he also mentions some of the retail places like Walmart to use just-in-time scheduling. So you don't know from week to week what your schedule is going to look like. And that can be sort of difficult to incorporate with a full-time job.
That's a great point. And it's not something I really brought up. And there are some downsides in what you choose to do. I mean, if you're walking around Lowe's all day and you have bad knees, I have one bad knee. When I walk the dog, my knees hurt a little bit. That might not be a great job to choose. And so the work environment where you go, like I'm at a standing desk, I'm standing up right now. Even just standing on for, a few hours working on carpet, makes my feet hurt. So I have a rubber mat. So maybe you need to work places. I think Mark recommended something like Trader Joe's.
Yes.
Where that you can stand on rubber mats. So that's definitely something to consider because you don't want to go into this pre-retirement saying, hey, I'm going to work at Home Depot and walk around all day, and a year in saying, man, my body is really taking a toll, but you need the income. So you definitely want to be thoughtful there. That's a great point. And then the just-in-time scheduling, I didn't think about, but if it's about gaining more time freedom, and then all of a sudden you don't even know what your schedule is week to week, I could see how that could be problematic.
That's rough. My sister worked retail when she was first out of college, and it was very difficult to not be able to plan more than a couple weeks ahead. So
yeah.
We have another comment on pre-retirement actually from John, who wrote in with a complaint about our math, I guess, saying that to make $50,000 a year in pre-retirement, you really would need a job of, $100K or more to start with. Otherwise, that's kind of a high bar to set for a pre-retirement job.
Very true. And that was probably a blind spot for me because generally I'm working with clients and we're walking life with them and we're thinking about, okay, how do we build the professional network and how do we start to build the skills so we can ease into whatever that pre-retirement work is. And the more planning you do and the more strategic about it, sometimes you can make extra money, than just thinking about it on the fly. And plus, I deal more with white collar people that are making over $100,000 a year and sometimes substantially higher. So he makes a really good point. So what do you...
you can go on some great trips for $10,000 a year or something like that. It definitely could help.
Yeah. So let's bring it down to maybe more realistic for a lot of people is, well, what if you made $10,000 a year? That's a good point. Well, with $10,000 a year, if you're retiring, say, before Medicare and Social Security kick in, so that could pay for, right, a great trip, a great retirement toy. It can maybe help you retire a year or two earlier. And then another way of thinking of the return on investment of even just making $10,000 a year is it's going to help supplement your lifestyle. And what that may allow you to do is preserve your retirement assets. Let's say you're like Bill from the first question where it's all in a 401k, which means you don't have to take $10,000 out of 401k, which really would be a lot less because of taxes. And that money can sit there each year for maybe 5 to 10 years, however long you're able to preserve it and actually grow. So it's not just simply the $10,000 can help supplement your lifestyle. It also means that you're going to have each year $10,000 more continually hope to work for you. So that's a really good point, but it doesn't have to be that $50,000 a year. It can be a lot less and still have a meaningful impact.
That was a really good point for John to bring up. He also did some loving on the podcast and mentioned your book and wants to know when it's coming.
See, I can actually smile about this book again because I've always felt guilty when I'm asked about it, either by you, Nicole, or people that are listeners. And we just actually ordered the author copies yesterday, right?
I'm so super excited. Guys, the book is awesome. Roger's going to be modest right now, but I'm really excited about it and I can't wait to get the copies.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll have copies in the next month or so. The official book launch, from a publisher standpoint, I don't think it's until March of next year. And there's some publisher logic about that. But we will be able to get books out as soon as I get them in our hot little hands. So I'm excited. I can smile again.
Yes, we're smiling. We're so glad you like the show too, John. So there are a few more listener ideas that we've received about pre-retirement. Some ideas that people are sharing about their own plans. We have Michael, who is taking his passion for wine and planning to work in a local wine shop. Sounds pretty fun.
That sounds like you could eat up your earnings through discounted wine.
Well, possibly, but you're not dipping into your retirement for it, though.
That is true. That is true.
We also have a lady who is considering becoming a professional organizer and helping people get their space organized.
I actually emailed her back, and I'm sorry, ma'am. I can't find the email to share your name, but I emailed her back and said, you could also do things like what you do, Nicole, right? You could be super organized and help other less organized people, i.e. Roger Whitney, to do well. So there are a lot of options you can do with that organizational gene.
Yes, it's really helpful to have.
I think the quote that Nicole always says is, Roger, I'm glad one of us listens to you. That's my favorite quote.
Well, you have great ideas. You just got to have a little help on the execution there. So the final one, you should practice your driving skills so you can drive the sag wagon. What is this?
So that's my friend John, who is an advisor in Michigan, and he and his wife, their pre-retirement occupation is going to be hosting bicycle tours.
What is the sag wagon?
So they love to ride bicycles together. And I love to ride bicycles together, but he's more serious about it than I am, at least right now. So the sag wagon is the guy that drives the van that brings the lunch, drives up if you have a flat tire and fixes the flat tire, and carries you if you're tired and fixes the bike and everything like that. So he was just like, dude, you're not near as fast as I am. You're going to be so lazy. You're just going to have to drive the sag wagon. So he's just...
Gotcha. Okay. Cyclist things that I did not know.
There you go. There you go.
Thanks, guys, for all of your awesome questions. I hope you found the answers helpful. And as a reminder, if you would like to ask Roger a question and maybe be featured on the show, you can go to rogerwhitney.com and click on Ask a Question. And now it's time to get happy.
Hey, welcome to the Happy Lab, where we noodle on how to live a happier life. So the other day, Nicole was complaining a little bit. She's usually upbeat, but she was complaining a little bit because she has two sons, and they both started school. And she said, I calculated it between dropping them off, picking them up, and everything else, like 2 hours a day. Is that right?
Yes, it's almost 2 hours a day.
See, that's the voice that she was using. But then we talked about it this morning, and she wasn't really that depressed about it. What are you doing with those 2 hours a day?
Okay, so don't make fun of me for my bad late 90s taste in music. But today was beautiful. It was sunny. It was cool. I opened the sunroof in my car and I turned Matchbox 20 up as loud as I could tolerate. And I just jammed out on the way home, and it put me in such a good mood, got me ready to get on the podcast. And I was just really happy.
There you go. So I guess the lesson there is you can even make a commute happy as long as you're intentional about it. And it could be music. It could be amazing podcast. It could be
calling someone you haven't talked to in a while. That's a
great way to use that commute, is connecting with. I called my sister today, who is in West Palm Beach, Florida, who is about to get slammed by Irma. Actually, by the time this airs, she will have been slammed. So say a little prayer for her. And you can call people, and that's a great point, and reconnect with people you always mean to call. So that's a great happy tip. Thanks, Nicole. All right, now we got a smart sprint. Let's figure out what we're going to do over the next 7 days.
On your marks, get set.
Hey, welcome to the Smart Sprint segment, where we set a 7-day goal, a little baby step to creating a great retirement. So in the hot topic today, we talked about spending in retirement, how it decreases over time unless you are a single person household. Usually it doesn't decrease. And I think the key element here to having financial flexibility is really dialing in what those needs are. What are the basic lifestyle needs to live a good life? Maybe not without the spices and the aspirational things, but knowing that basic lifestyle need, that line that you really don't want to go under, is super important. I've asked you to do this before, and it's always a moving target, so it's always good to continue to do this, is dial in what those needs are, because that's really going to be the bogey that we can make sure that we're going to be okay. So in the next 7 days, go back and revisit what you've done. If you've already dialed those in, to tweak it a little bit. And if you haven't, start the journey to really knowing what it takes to maintain your household and live a good life. All right, Nicole, this was your first podcast. How do you feel?
I feel awesome. I am so excited that I got to be on the show this week. Hopefully I'll get to come back. But in case I don't, can I do one really cheesy thing?
Am I able to stop you?
No, you can't.
Go ahead.
My mom comments on our Facebook posts every week. So I just want to say, hi, Mom, I'm on the show.
That's so cute. All right. Now, we are currently accepting clients, and we work with people all over the country over the age of 50 that are on this retirement journey. Nicole, if somebody wants to connect with us to have a chat about how they can work with you and I, where should they go?
Check us out on rogerwhitney.com. I know you all want a little more Roger in your life, so we can't wait to hear from you. And until next week.
This is the Retirement Answer Man.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.